to pass along before I introduce them. We had a family that reached out to me directly a couple weeks ago, and they had a family member who had early onset of dementia and was starting to have really aggressive tendencies. In the past, we kind of just wait, and eventually police would probably be called. But because we've got this embedded social work program, we were able to connect the social workers with that family and put some things in place to hopefully prevent this from ever being a crisis or 911 call. Our social workers are also working on a couple, a vulnerable adult in a group home that continues to wander away. And in the past, we just would keep going out as police, take missing persons report, find them. What we found is they've been able to build a relationship with that vulnerable adult and the staff and the family, and are now working on solutions. So hopefully those don't become police calls, and also we can have better care for that individual. So just some kind of different ways that we're doing things differently here in Roseville that I'm really proud of. So now the important part, actually the introduction. I'm going to start with Molly Slade. Many of you know her. She was a Roseville resident and was formerly on the Human Rights Commission from 2014 to 2017. She was really inspired to get into this work after the Philando Castile tragedy, and really wanted to be part of meaningful change. And I will tell you, in the 2 years that we've had her embedded, there's some great progress being made on that. Molly brings over 20 years of experience with mental health, including a decade working with individuals with mental illness. She's got a Master's of Social Work from St. Thomas and has clinical licensure that she obtained in 2022. She's not new. As we mentioned, she was previously through a contract with People's Inc., and we are just really excited that we were able to bring her into this new position and have her continue the work that she really started. So super excited about that. And now I'll quick jump to Amber Ruth. Although Amber Ruth is new to us, she has a long history of this type of work. She's got over 20 years of community mental health work. She was a former embedded social work with St. Paul's Coast team. So doing a lot of the same work embedded in the St. Paul Police Department. She's got program leadership experience, community development, and has spoken at a number of conferences. And she also holds certifications in forensic social work, crisis de-escalation, and equine assisted learning, which I had to research a little bit about that. But she brings just a lot of community-centered intervention and experience. I just can't say enough how fortunate we are. It was a really competitive process, and we were fortunate to get two of the best in the metro area that just have an outstanding reputation. So I also want to take this time to also thank the council for making this happen. This has been something that we've talked about for a number of years, but to be able to have the support, the financial commitment to really make this a lasting positions has really taken all of your support. So it's kind of fun to see it finally coming, we made it. Didn't really know when we started where it was going, but without a doubt, the work that they're doing here is just unbelievable and really impacting members of our community. So with that, if you've got any questions, I'm sure they're willing to answer any questions or any comments that you might have.
Well, thank you so much for stepping forward to do that work for Roseville and wanting to serve our community in that way, and especially in the case of Molly with the long connection to the community. We really do appreciate the continuing interest in helping in that way, and I echo or I support the Chief's analysis that this is making a big difference in our community for individuals, and really is doing what we hoped it would do and felt it should do, which is to really connect people with resources and allow law enforcement resources to be used for law enforcement purposes. And I think that we're seeing the fruition of that. And so I really do appreciate the work that you do. We know it's not easy. We know people are, just like with law enforcement work, we're encountering people oftentimes in not the best times in their life. And it's just really heartening to know that people are able to be connected with what's going to help them hopefully get to a better place in their situation. So we, once again, are just very grateful that you're serving in this way and that we have this to offer our community. So I wanted to say that, and I'm sure I'll be echoed by other council members, but I wanted to set the bar high. Councilmember Schroeder.
All right. Well, I guess that's a hard act to follow. Actually, a couple of things I wanted to say was, one, it's very rare that I'm not out in the community that this whole thing doesn't come up. I'm really proud to be able to talk about this program that we have, because it's amazing. There's still a lot of people who aren't even aware of it. And so, and then when I talk about it, people are like, oh, wow. And so it's a great thing to be able to offer and then to get people to know about it. And the second thing is, I do know how hard it is for someone in crisis particularly to figure out how to navigate the systems to get help. Because everything is very disjointed and trying to figure it out and to have people to help navigate, even if you don't have a crisis, trying to navigate is very, very difficult. And so I wanted to say I really appreciate the hard work you're doing. And I do know that it's all about building the relationships too. This isn't just you go in for 5 minutes and then move on. And this is something that you have to continually do. And I also know, talking to the chief and others, that some of our, I think you just mentioned a few of them, the repeat people coming through, those being able to reach out and work with them and help them find the help they need and then feel safe in our community. So I echo what the mayor said and just want to say thank you and welcome, and it's exciting, so thanks.
Councilmember Strong.
Thank you. And what I love about Molly is that every time you see her, she's
Yes.
she's just so excited to be here. It's really appreciated that. It's probably kind of a rare attribute in the police department to see someone. I just really appreciate the proactive approach. It's not uncommon that people reach out and say, you know what we really need in Roseville? And it's really nice to be able to say, we actually have that and more. And so I appreciate you joining Sean Johnson, Carrie McCullough, and part of that CAT team and all the work that they do there, because it is really invaluable and it sets us apart as a community. And it's definitely a source of pride that, hey, we continue to have this thing that really takes care of people. And again, I just really appreciate the proactive approach. I work at a nursing home, so, I know that a lot of times it took a lot till they got to that point. And so it's really helpful to know, but not just seniors, but other folks in the community, children in the schools and other things that you bring in. So we are very honored to have such talent, and maybe we're going to have a horse come and tell us more about equine learning.
I was just looking, I'm curious about the 2026 budget.
Get the horse.
The Roseville horse. Councilmember Groff?
I'm not going to repeat all. I totally agree with all those comments, of course. And of course, Molly, you've done such great work for the city, and I'm sure you will be too, Amber. But what I've noticed is when I'm on other boards or where there are other council members from other cities, they're going like, how do you do that in Roseville? You're doing and they're so jealous of this system that we have in place. And they're also trying to figure out how to get it into their cities and reproduce that. And I noticed that when Representative Finke was here and spoke with you and the CAT team, and I came and sat in, how excited she was about it and saying, we've got to get this to other places too, because this program should be around the whole metro area. So thanks for all your work. It's really encouraging.
And Councilmember Bauer.
Echo what my fellow council members have stated. Also very excited to have you join. And hopefully this will be the first of many visits. Looking forward to getting feedback as well, how we can make this great program, as we noted, even better. The challenges, problems that we have are not static. They change over time. The needs change over time. The dynamic is there. So encourage you to bring that forward to us and see if we can continue to improve this program.
All right. Any final words from the folks who are introduced this evening, just to maybe start the feedback process? Or
Here's your chance to ask.
right, yeah.
I just had two thoughts, because of course I do. But one, what I love best is the stories that you don't hear about. Things that we're able to step in that won't become headline news. And I just keep thinking about that. Resonates with me, because one of the things I love about this is that we can be proactive and we see it coming, and if, not always, but to be able to, before it even becomes a story and no one knows, and we're like ninjas going out and hopefully helping out. And once again, like, I have been involved with the city, and to watch this come to fruition is, I don't know if I would do it for any other department. It's an amazing department from the top down. It is not box checking, and I appreciate that.
All right.
I just want to say thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be part of this journey.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, and now back to work.
I'll go start working on that course petition for the budget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Well, with that, I guess we got to do our business now this evening, so we'll switch gears a little bit here. Speaking of budgets, our first item under our business items this evening is to receive our 2024 audit. And we've got our finance director, Michelle Petrick, with us, as well as our representative from Redpath, Rebecca Peterson, who was involved in the audit process and is here to present this evening. So I know I've made those introductions now, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Petrick to repeat that.
Well, you took my thunders.
Sorry.
We're required to have an audit by statute, and we choose to have an audit because we also submit our annual comprehensive financial report to the Government Finance Officers Association, and we have continued to receive the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. So with that, I will turn it over to Rebecca Peterson, Managing Director for Redpath, to explain the audit results and answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you for having me here this evening. I'm going to go through a summary of the reports that we issue in conjunction with the audit. If you've read the reports in the past, you know that they are full of templated standard language, and so I'm going to try and draw out just the key points that you need to know. The first report that we issue in conjunction with the audit is the opinion on the financial statements, and this is the primary purpose of an audit. It's the reason that you as City Council hire us. And it's to review or audit the financial statements that city staff prepare and provide our opinion on the fair presentation of those statements. It would be cost and time prohibitive if we looked at every single transaction that the city entered into, so we look at them on a sample basis, sufficient enough to provide an opinion on the statements. Our opinion this year is a clean, unmodified opinion that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. Not that they're exact to the dollar, just that they're fairly presented. It's the highest level of assurance we can provide, and in short, it's the result you want from your audit. And here is the Certificate of Achievement that the city received last year on your 2023 financial statements. And the 2024 statements will be submitted to the certificate program as well, and we believe you'll receive the award for those. The next report we issue in conjunction with the audit is a report on internal controls. As part of the audit, we don't audit the city's internal controls, but we gain an understanding of the processes and procedures that are in place. And if anything comes to our attention that we think warrants your attention as governance, or there's anything that we're required to report to you, it would be reported in this report. This year, there's one finding reported for audit adjustments. This is the type of finding that auditing standards obligate us to report. Anytime that during the audit process an adjustment to the city's books is identified that crosses our materiality threshold, we have to report it as a finding. It's extremely common finding for cities to receive, and this year there was only one audit adjustment that crossed the threshold for reporting, and it was related to some loans receivable that the city's obligated to collect but weren't currently reflected on the city's books. It was not the city's source money. It was from a different governmental agency that the city is simply responsible for collecting. So the financial statements were adjusted for that, and that was the only audit adjustment of significance this year. The next report that we issue in conjunction with the audit is a report on Minnesota legal compliance. The Office of the State Auditor asks us as auditors during the course of our audit to look at certain legal requirements. They have a series of 7 areas that they like us to look at, and I always qualify that with we are not attorneys, we're accountants, and so we're looking at this from an accounting perspective. We're looking at things like, does the city have sufficient collateral for your cash deposits? Are you investing city funds in investments that are allowable by state statute? We look at conflicts of interest, bid laws, those types of things. This year, there were no instances of noncompliance that came to our attention that warranted reporting in the report, so no findings this year, which, again, is the result you want. The next report that we issued in conjunction with the audit this year is a report on federal program compliance. Anytime the city spends more than $750,000 of federal funds, you're obligated to get a federal compliance audit. And so this doesn't happen every year, but with recent COVID funding, you've had one for several years in a row. This year, because of the ARPA funding, you were required to have the audit. We audited for compliance with the program requirements that the federal government asks us to, and there were no reportable instances of noncompliance and no question costs identified during our audit. So again, that is the result you would hope for. The final report that we issue in conjunction with the audit is a communication to those charged with governance. It's a several-page letter, again, full of standard language. I've just called out a couple of key points here. One of the items that we're required to communicate with you is any changes in accounting standards. There are new GASB standards that the city is obligated to follow every single year. This year, there's a new standard on compensated absences. The city considered it and implemented it, but it didn't really have any significant impact on the city's financial statements. I always like to remind you that there are estimates within the financial statements. If you look at Statement 1 to your financial statements, you'll see some large liabilities on there, both for net pension liability and OPEB. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. These are actuarially determined liabilities that just represent the present value of future costs that the city may be subject to. They are not liabilities that you're going to have to pay next week, next month, next year. They're just representative of future items that are out there. If we had any disagreements with management during the course of our audit, we would likely be communicating with you before now, but it's one of the pieces that we're required to communicate in this letter. So I'm pleased to report no disagreements with management during the course of the audit, no difficulties encountered during the course of the audit. And I do want to say, with some recent staff turnover in finance, the ability of the finance team to get the audit done on time and on schedule was greatly appreciated by us, but also impressive that that was able to happen. No other significant matters came to our attention during the course of the audit, but if they had, we would be communicating them in this letter. Next up, I have some high-level summary financial information. First up is some summary information about the city's governmental funds. As a reminder, or if you're not familiar, the city has two types of funds. There's the business type funds that are generally intended to be self-supporting, and there's the governmental funds that use grants and property tax revenues to sustain themselves. By fund type, I have a schedule here of the revenues, the inflows, the expenditures and other outflows, transfers between funds, and ultimately the change in fund balance. You'll see the type of fund that had the most significant change this year is down at the bottom, the capital project funds. One column over from the left, you'll see that fund balance changed about $2.4 million. That's really coming from two different sources. There was some public safety aid that was transferred into a capital fund to fund some capital purchases. And also there was some TIF revenue coming into one of the increment funds that exists now, but will be paid out to developers in the near future. So you'll see an increase of $2.4 million in fund balance, but I just want to point out that those funds are committed and restricted for specific purposes. Next up, I have a summary of the general fund balance, and you can see there were variances throughout, expenditures and transfers, but at the end of the day, the net change in fund balance for your general fund was a $120,000 reduction compared to a budgeted $114,000 reduction, and it's hard to get much closer to that on budget. So overall positive results in the general fund.
Just to add to that.
Yeah.
That is the general fund only. In the audit report, there's the general fund, which is the general fund plus 3 or 4 other funds that get combined. So that chart is just for the city's general fund.
Then next up, I just have a comparison of the city's general fund balance, especially as you head into the 26 budget cycle. This is important to be aware of. The city needs to maintain reserves to fund future operations, to fund cash flow. Your property tax payments come in twice a year, and you need to have enough cushion to get yourself to the next payment. You need to have enough cash on hand to fund unexpected expenses. And so the city has a fund balance policy that you're going to target to maintain between 35% and 50% of the next year's expenditures within fund balance. This year, after year-end closing entries were made, you're at about 38.4%, which is at the low end of your policy, but still within a healthy range. And finally, for government funds, I just have a trend showing the types of revenues that are funding your operations in governmental funds. You see that big blue bar at the bottom, that chunk, that is property taxes and assessments. So that is the most significant funding source for your governmental funds. And then you've got some charges for services and intergovernmental revenue making up the majority of the rest of the difference. And then miscellaneous fees, licenses and permits and whatnot are making up the rest. But most significantly, your property taxes, charges for services, and intergovernmental revenues are what are funding your governmental operations. Next, I have some trends for your business type funds. First up, we have water fund operations. And this is looking at operating expenses and operating revenue. So if you look at that bluish bar, that's the expenses for your fund, and the dark red line is your operating revenue. Within your business type funds, particularly your utility funds, you really want to make sure that that operating revenue is covering your operating expenses with a gap. Capital for your utilities is quite expensive, and so you need that gap between operating revenues and expenses to save for future capital acquisitions. If you look back at 21-22, your operating revenue was not quite covering your operating expenses, but I think there's been some utility rate studies and other work done to try and build that gap. And then I wanted to point out water fund cash flows. The water fund has struggled for a couple of years maintaining cash balances. This year, there was a cash transfer into the fund to help with the refund of some of those deposits payable, which I know the council worked through. And if you look at this table, lower right-hand number, cash balances at the end of 2024 were over $2 million. And that's the healthiest that the fund has been in a number of years. So it's moving in the right direction with some positive cash flow. Next up, I have the sewer utility fund. And you can see here that gap between your operating revenues and expenses over time is much healthier than the water has been. It maintains that gap for future capital needs. Next up is storm drainage operations. And this one tends to fluctuate. I know that there was a utility rate study done that impacted the rates in here to try and build some cash reserves. And you can see that operating revenue is trending up. My understanding is it's something that's going to be looked at during the 2026 budget cycle to make sure that your fees are at the right level here. Next up, I have golf course operations. You'll see two different shades of blue here. The reason for that is that darker blue represents true operating expenses within the fund. The lighter blue reflects depreciation, the book expense of having capital assets. And I called it out separately because that operating revenue is in some years struggling to cover operating expenses. Recreation funds are notoriously hard to maintain themselves. Oftentimes when capital needs exist, transfers in are required. But I will mention that part of the 2024 operating expenses is some actuarial adjustments from those actuarially determined liabilities I mentioned earlier. They are impacting the expense number there a little bit, but still operating revenue not quite covering expenses. And finally, solid waste recycling. This is one that you can see the expenses tend to move a little bit over time, just depending on the timing of services and whatnot. But if you imagine a trend line of your expenses over the years, your operating revenue is covering expenses generally. You'll see there's two lines there. The red is true operating revenue, and then that blue line includes grants. The city has an annual grant that helps cover some of the expenses within the fund. So over time, covering expenses. And that's all I have pre-prepared for you today, but happy to answer any questions if there are any.
All right, thank you for the presentation and, of course, all the work behind the scenes in the auditing process. We'll open it up for council questions. Councilmember Schroeder.
They always tease me because finance is my background, so they tease me about this. Just a couple of questions because a lot of my questions the finance director was very helpful in answering a number of things before the meeting. So just talking about the internal controls, do you look at things like new vendor processes? So as we know, new vendor is one area where scams and fraud can happen. So do you actually get to that level of looking at those kind of processes?
We do review of controls over vendors on a cyclical basis. And so we have different things that we look at every year. You know, one year we might look at this component of the process. Next year we look at this component of the process. But conversations around that is something we emphasize heavily during both our audit planning meetings and our off-cycle meetings when we meet with the city staff year-round. Because as you indicate, that is a significant risk to local governments especially, because so much information is available right on your website and in your board packets. And the best defense against that is awareness, and continually reminding staff how important it is to question things and be aware. So we do look at it during the course of our audit, but it's also something that we talk about year-round with city staff.
And then, how many do the field work from your organization?
Let's see, this year I think we had 4 staff on site. We do a hybrid approach where we do some audit work actually out at the city, and then we do some from our offices, just depending on what's most efficient for what we're working on. But it's generally myself as the audit signer, and then there will be a manager, a senior, and 1 or 2 staff on the audit.
So then does one of the partners review it before it gets finalized, or are you the last?
Yeah, my title's managing director, but I have signing authority over the report. Yep.
I wasn't clear on that one, so thank you on
Yep.
that. And then, how many years has Red Path been doing the audit?
We just started a second contract, so I want to
4.
say
Then
Because they're 3-year contracts, I believe.
3-year contracts, yeah.
So this would be
More
the
than-
4th year?
I think it's more than 4 years. I actually do not know.
Remember.
In full transparency, Roseville, when they first came to Red Path as a client, Dave Mall was the engagement partner, and he has since retired, and I've moved on to the engagement, which is why I don't have that institutional history of how many years. But I want to say somewhere around 6 would be my best guess.
Mr. Treasurer.
I don't know the exact number, but I know, first of all, we have a policy for professional services every 3 years. But I know we purposely look to go to different auditors over a period of time, so we have another set of eyes looking at it. I think this is maybe Red Path's second or third
It's our second
cycle
cycle.
through here
Second.
since I've been with the city over the years. So that's something we always want to look at to make sure we have different sets of eyes.
Yeah. We actually did do the RFP since I've been here, and I've been here 5.5 years. And so they're in their second round of, it was a 3-year plus an extension of 3. So less than 6, more than 3.
Okay, and then this is, I know our finance chair is sitting in the back there, and so my question is, when are you going to be presenting to the Finance Commission, and is that presentation different from this one?
Tomorrow. And we will use the PowerPoint from tonight as the basis for that conversation. We just tend to get into a little more detailed questions during that meeting.
Okay, because I'm sure they probably appreciate the detail a little bit, getting into the granule than at this level does. So I appreciate that. But then some of my other questions you actually answered. So thank you for actually presenting it, and I'm looking forward to see what the Finance Commission has to say too.
All right, other questions? Councilmember Bob?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more on the sampling that you noted about to test some of these accounts to ensure the numbers you received are valid numbers.
Yep, so we use a variety of sampling techniques. When we do the federal compliance audit, the federal government has specific sample sizes that they like us to use, and so we follow specifically those sample sizes. And the sample size will vary depending on the population that we're testing. A general rule of thumb for small items is we might look at 10% of the transactions. For larger populations, we might look at 25, 40, 60, just depending on the risk involved in the area and the population that we're looking at. During the financial audit, It's similar sampling guidance, but we have a little bit more freedom within our testing to really look at the risks involved in the areas we're testing. And we use larger sample sizes for transactions in riskier areas and smaller sample sizes for transactions in less risky areas. And so it's hard for me to tell you exactly the size of the samples we look at, but we follow the AICPA guidance, and 10% is a general rule of thumb for small populations if you're looking for perspective on numbers.
And this is across all accounts or a selection of accounts? Or funds?
Or funds. We audit trying to think how I want to explain this. We look at the funds as a whole. So when we're auditing, let's say we're auditing cash, we will look at cash spread across the city as a whole, but the materiality for different funds is different. And so we will use a materiality threshold appropriate to what we're testing. So for example, if there is special assessment revenue in one fund that has a low materiality, we will use a low materiality when testing special assessment revenue. If there is a type of transaction that's only in the general fund and the general fund has a higher materiality, we'll use materiality appropriate to that fund. So the materiality scales a little bit depending on what fund we're looking at, but we do look at transactions across the city as a whole, not funds individually.
Thank you.
And just to clarify one point, when you talk about a population, you're talking about a number of transactions?
Exactly, yes,
Not
not people.
population.
Unless we're looking at utilities, then maybe.
Right. Councilmember Groff.
Thank you for the report, and as I was mentioning earlier to you, I read several of these every year for different organizations I'm on the board for, so a lot of the language is very familiar. But I think the thing residents want to know is, of course, that it's audited and that it's by a reputable company, and they don't really go into the details that we do reading all of these things, but they like to know that part. The thing that's really helpful for me is that this helps us early in the budgeting process so we can look at things and see where the gaps are and where we might be looking forward to the next budget and making some adjustments, and that helps us with our planning. So thank you.
And just to add to that, I think it also helps sometimes with our policy adjustments based on what we're hearing as feedback in the audit process. So that's a helpful part of this as well. And I did want to just go back to the question about the contract and the term. I think for the members of the public, I think our policy is generally a 3-year term for professional services contract. There's an option typically at that point to look at sort of extending or continuing, and it's an opportunity to look at how the performance was, and then typically if things look good, the city manager may recommend going ahead with another 3-year term, depending on the specific legal part of the agreement. But then our policy, tends to want us to, after 2 3-year terms, look again at that RFP process. Sometimes things are more frequently done that way, just depends on the service that's being provided to the city and the history of that particular service, but that just provides the members of the public sort of a general idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about these professional services, not necessarily specific to auditing, but more broadly, just maybe to help folks understand that. And anything I said wrong, I must be trained.
Well, actually, the purchasing policy that was approved has the automatic first 3-year automatic extension to 3 years if satisfactory performance that you approved a few years ago.
And I could be referring
But-
back to older policy
Yeah.
language from back in the days, when I first started here.
But the other thing, because I've been in this business long enough that I know when you switch audit firms, you really spend the first 2 years with the audit firm having to spend more time, more hours to get familiar with the city's policies and procedures. And so generally speaking, 6 years is when you get the best
Sure.
return on your investment, so to speak.
Got it. Thank you. Councilmember Bauer.
One other comment, noting, you mentioned this will be given to the Finance Commission, I believe, later this week or?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes. I encourage you to go, feel free to continue the presentation or go deeper. We definitely look to the Finance Commission to dig into this audit and provide feedback to us, and we'll be able to act on that, and we'll use that. So definitely encourage you to go longer or deeper into this, as we will be looking to them to get more information to us.
And sometimes their questions get deeper, don't they? Right?
Yes.
All All right. Well, thank you again. I believe, do we have to take an action to accept the,
Public comment?
oh, you're right. I apologize. I was just double checking what the action was required. We do need to accept the 2024 financial reports, but let's do a check to see if there is anyone from the public that wishes to speak at this time regarding our audit. All right. And certainly we make all this information available. Our financial reports are available to the public on the city's website going back many years, as well as budgets. And so there's lots of opportunities to check our finances for members of the public who are interested in particular areas. And I know Ms. Petrick and her staff are more than happy to answer questions as the public has them about the city's operations as well, and we appreciate that. So thanks again. If there's no one from the public who wishes to speak, we do have the request for a motion to accept the 2024 city financial reports.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Groff. Discussion on the motion as the maker of the motion, Councilmember Schroeder. Right, as the seconder, Councilmember Groff. Other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we've got the motion before us to accept those 2024 financial reports. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and those reports are accepted. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to our second item this evening on business items, and that is to consider a conditional use request associated with a apartment development being proposed on off of Snelling, north of County Road C. We'll say that, and we can get into more specifics. And with us this evening, we have our senior planner, Brian Lloyd, with us to introduce this to the council for our consideration after following up on the hearing at the Planning Commission earlier. Mr. Lloyd, welcome.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is an application for conditional use approval, and we'll get into the sort of details of that in a moment. The location here is 2940 Snelling Avenue between County Road C2 and Lydia there on the east side of Snelling. And the proposal generally is to redevelop this site, which has been a medical office building the structure itself is some 50-odd years old. And it's in a stretch along Snelling Avenue there that has over the years been guided and zoned for multifamily uses mostly. And many of the properties along this stretch of Snelling Avenue have indeed been developed as apartments in that time. And the high density district that regulates this property in the zoning code allows for a standard density limit of up to 24 dwelling units per acre, and allows applicants to seek approval of up to 36 units an acre under this conditional use review and approval process. The proposal here is essentially just to get 2 extra dwellings above what the standard limit would allow here. So from I believe it's 16 units that they could get under the 24 units an acre density. They're seeking approval for what would be mathematically 28 units per acre, or 18 total units there. As was mentioned, the public hearing was held by the Planning Commission. It was unusually long ago with respect to when the city council meeting is. That was back in early March. But there was a lot of discussion at the public hearing about the other apartment properties, especially further south that are now, or that have been acquired by the owner of this property and have been kind of incrementally updated and improved and invested in. And the property owner was unavailable to be at that public hearing, but we scheduled the city council's review this evening in case there were further conversations about those other properties that council or the public wanted to engage in, and the property owner would be here for those conversations. Beyond that, I would really just end what is a pretty cursory presentation with our recommendation and the Planning Commission's recommendation to approve the conditional use request, allowing that 28 unit per acre density, with the one condition of adding a pathway easement along the western side of the property there, a 5-foot easement for the future construction of a path at some point when more easement can be acquired along there. This seems to be a pretty common street for particularly students over at Northwestern, to park along and then walk over to school rather than parking on campus. So the pathway easement would be adding, a pedestrian facility along a street where there isn't presently one. So that kind of explains the condition that we're recommending. And aside from that, I can end the presentation and see if there are questions that I can answer for you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Questions from the council? Councilmember Strawn.
Thank you. On the very bottom, it indicates an existing two-way traffic at the property line. Is that specifically for these apartment dwellings, or is that a public road? When I look at the prior map, I don't see it extending into the other residential.
So that two-way aisle that you noted is essentially the parking ingress and egress that has been built for the apartment to the south, which is owned by this same owner applying for this approval. And the zoning code allows for adjacent properties to share parking facilities, to be able to, use circulation and even share stalls across properties, if there's enough stalls and access for both of those properties or all of those properties to take advantage of. And so the proposed apartment, has a main parking lot ingress on the north side of this site, and cars can come around and, can either circle back and park in here or use some stalls that will be available, shared stalls further south, not on this plan any longer, and then being able to exit back to Snelling along the south side there.
So that's not the only in and out space is in that two-way? Well, there's the in here, but that's not the only way out?
It's the only vehicle exit for the property. I got a bigger one there.
Is there maybe a further exit
Thanks.
further south on the southern property?
Yeah, and that may be true, and it's not showing on even this sort of larger view here. But right, the single egress, that shows up on the sort of main site plan that's with the packet this evening, isn't an issue for staff. The zoning code in the parking regulations certainly allows for one-way drive aisles with angled parking stalls, which would typically lead to one way in and one way out of a parking lot.
Yeah, I think how many how many apartments are in the southern section of the dwellings? That would be the rest of Lydia Rose.
I'm not sure how many dwellings
I just
are
was
in
wondering
the other
about those
apartments further
parking
south.
spots that are abutting the building and they're at a 90-degree. Just wondering about the safety of those going out into that two-way traffic, if that's the only egress and ingress and to the main traffic there, if all the residents in that area are coming and going from that and someone is attempting to back up in that area, just wanting to make sure that that's a safe place to have a handicap spot, an EV spot, places, someone in a handicap, that might be the only place, is that a safe place for them to be if their vehicle is, more difficult to see around and things like that.
Is that the same sort of parking that's on the south side of that two-way is straight,
Yes, and the drive aisles and parking lot dimensions generally would conform to the standards of the zoning code.
Could
And
you go back to that other one? Because I think it was, my question was that it's on the property line. It abuts the property line.
There we go.
So yeah, just there, that right up to the parking goes all the way right up to the property line.
Yes.
And that those are at a 90-degree
Yes,
angle to.
those are.
Yeah, and so if, 200 cars are coming and going only from there, is that the safest way that should those be also at a 45-degree angle? Obviously, you would have less parking there, but maybe that would be safer for someone to exit from that spot. I'm just making sure that that is considered, if that's the only way that people can get back out to East Snelling Drive.
It may be the most convenient egress back out to Snelling, but the parking lot dimensions for the 90-degree stalls here would be the same as, is standard in every other parking lot that might be busy and have ADA stalls and EV charging places. and lots of traffic at times. So I suppose there's always some risk in driving around a parking lot, but the implementation here would be, up to the same standards as elsewhere.
And then just one other question, does any of this redevelopment of this, if we were to approve it, trigger EV redevelopment in the rest of the complex?
No, not in the rest of the complex. Conceivably, at some point when the parking lot, when the surface parking areas of the other apartment buildings are substantially redeveloped, then our EV requirements for those properties would kick in. And EV requirements would certainly apply to the proposed apartment here, and within the property, or within the sort of stalls that are both in the property and being shared. There's a couple of shared stalls that are kind of accruing to this property as well. And in that required number of stalls, there is a minimum number of EV parking requirements that coincide with that. They will be implemented here, and others would be implemented, when those sort of thresholds are crossed for those properties.
Yeah, I guess I do have one more other question. So I don't know if there's been any consideration to anything other than just surface parking. I know our recent other market development had underground parking. Does this impact the permeable surfaces allotment that this building would have by having that much surface parking?
The site, as it's shown on the plan here, does conform to I think it's a 75% coverage limit in this district. And there is no underground parking. That is the topic of significant conversation at the public hearing. There was members of the Planning Commission that encouraged the further exploration of underground parking. That is something that the site designer evaluated as a possibility, and the small size of the building and limited sort of approach distance made it unfeasible, impractical to implement that here.
Do you know what the expected square footage of these 2-bedroom units is?
On the plan here, it indicates they're about 1,000 feet, 1,036.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Councilmember Groff?
Just a comment, I read in the notes that there would be screening, or there is screening for headlights.
There is probably today as a function of the existing apartment building that's been there. But as the site is redeveloped, yes, there are screening requirements, particularly as it pertains to what would be the eastern side of the site facing the lower density residential uses behind there.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bauer?
So reclassifying this, could you state once again what the maximum number of units could be on this particular parcel?
Under the standard density limit in the high density district, the maximum is 24 units per acre. The conditional use approval process that we're engaged in now can allow up to 36 units per acre, and they're seeking 28 units per acre.
In this site, the parcel size of this parcel size is
About 2/3 of an acre, I think.
2/3 of an acre. Thank you. And I saw there's a note here from Ms. Lowry noting a city right-of-way permit is required. Is that still necessary? I mean, in the future, and if so, roughly what is that for?
That's generally going to be for work that's done on the utility services and the parking lot access. Having an agreement for cutting into curb lines, restoring curbs, making sure that that roadways are after the disruption is over from construction, that they are kind of restored to standard conditions.
Okay, so there's the standard permit that we would like to we normally
Yes, yeah. And that's a standard comment from the city engineer.
Right. Councilmember Schroeder, do you have a question? Right, Councilmember Strawn?
I was just curious if Community Development Director Gunlock or Mr. Lloyd could speak to, we had, in our housing study, we had said how many 2-bedroom multifamily units we were short. I don't know, maybe that's because I know that 2-bedroom multifamily units have been something that we've been a bit undersized on, and just wondering how many we are short, and if this would help to contribute to any shortage that we may have identified.
I don't know the exact numbers, particularly with respect to 2 bedrooms, but certainly, both the existing housing needs assessment from several years ago and the current update, both would indicate that there is market capacity for these units and more. And the units that have been coming online, in recent years have been leased up fairly quickly. So it seems like the demand really is there, and it's not just a function of estimates in a study.
Another question.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
This is maybe more for the owners of the building, but how would the pricing of this particular apartment be if this is looking at market rate? I don't know that those other buildings are currently at market rate, and is it going to substantially change the rental rates of the other buildings that are adjacent to this?
And we can follow up with the
Yeah, that
opportunity
would
for
have to
the,
be for them.
Thank
for
you.
the applicant to speak. I did have a couple of questions. Are there currently any other pathway easements existing along that stretch of the service drive?
I don't believe there is. This
Okay,
would be
so
kind
this
of
is
the first.
This is the first,
Yep.
and obviously it's 5 feet. The point there is not that we use 5 feet to make a pathway, but we need the additional width
Yes.
as opposed to the existing right-of-way.
Right.
All right, thank you. And then second, I'm trying to remember, on shared parking, is that a private agreement between properties? Is there anything that's filed with the property, say at the county or anything like that, when there's a shared parking agreement?
I don't
I'm
remember
just
the
thinking, because a lot of
provisions.
times people use that as a means to meet parking requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if, if the agreement goes away, if people, can't, obviously it's the same owner, so it helps. Hopefully they can stay in agreement with themselves. But, going down the road, if there's a change in that situation, how does that impact when we're trying to make sure that we've got adequate parking?
I don't remember what our zoning code says as required documentation, but certainly, these shared parking agreements are easements, formally speaking, which would have specific, areas of a site that, the users of one property are allowed to sort of access on the other, how many stalls perhaps are part of that shared agreement. And I would expect that to be part of an easement that is recorded at the county, whether or not the zoning code specifies something like that as a requirement.
Right, yeah, and I wasn't sure that we specified it, but I was trying to remember how that was accounted for, so I appreciate that. It does appear that the building to the south does, I think, have underground parking, if I look at the aerial photograph, unless that's just an area that has access for trash pickup or something. But anyway.
I believe that's right.
Kind of a moot point. All right, I do want to provide an opportunity if a representative of the applicant wants to speak to any of the questions that have been asked this evening or has anything else to say in support of their application, this would be an opportunity at your option to do that. All right, do you have any additional information as to how that might affect the market rate rents of other buildings? And we just ask you to introduce yourself as you start your comments.
I'm Dennis Hummel, the owner, or primary owner, and my son back there is also part owner.
Have a seat, make
And
yourself
this is
comfortable.
Kathy Kinney. She's our property manager, and she can address the rental issue because she is pretty much involved with that.
So the entire community that we have is market rate, so it would be just a little bit elevated. There's such a demand now for 2-bed, 2 baths. We have 2-bed, 1 bath, and especially with the colleges so close by, we thought it would really provide some very needed housing to service that. And as far as the parking goes, there is an underground parking garage right next door that certainly can very easily be utilized by this building. And that back area where it goes to the right behind the building, behind the middle building, which is our longest building, they can go straight out and they can go out at the very end, or they can turn right at the edge of that building between the buildings and go out. So there's more than one option for them to get out.
I believe there's a curb where that property line is, right? So the people from that 3-story building can't, well, they could drive across the curb, I suppose, if they wanted to, but otherwise, they will be going out within that property.
Sure, sure.
I'm pretty sure there is.
And when you talk about the continuing on, you talk about continuing to the south towards C2, I believe, behind the buildings?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. I did
Yep,
notice that
so they
on the
can go
aerial.
behind that, and our clubhouse is almost to the end, and the entrance to it is actually that way. So people could go either way.
So on just the currently available aerial photography, it appears that the next exit to the south is all the way to the south of the southernmost building in
It
that
is.
area.
It is.
C2? Yeah, okay.
It's also interesting to note that so far, even though we're 97% occupied with 63 apartments at these three buildings, only 40% of the underground parking is being utilized. So it'd be easy to try to keep those full by utilizing the tenants who want underground parking, by just, give them
You just have to figure out an underground connection between the buildings.
maybe a clicker to open the door.
Or an
garage
umbrella,
doors.
or an umbrella to carry.
There you go.
All right. Does council have any other questions for the applicant while they're up? All right. Anything else that you wanted to say in support of your application while we've got you here?
He's their architect right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, other than that we meet all the other criteria for design for it, and yes, we're just asking for a slight increase in density because we can accommodate that. And then, yes, the exit here also extends around that building as well.
Right. Okay. Oh, yeah, if you could just say your name for
Oh,
the record.
I'm Matt Faber.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And there is parking down here also.
Yeah.
Like I said, the clubhouse is back here, so there would be some traffic that would be going there anyway.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you for being here this evening, and I know we rescheduled or scheduled out a little bit to accommodate everybody being able to be here to answer questions, so we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll double check if there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening. We do want to avail folks of that opportunity. We do have a fairly sparse crowd here this evening, so it doesn't appear that there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item. Mr. Lloyd, if you want to come back up in case there are any questions that we come up with here at the last moment. But otherwise, we have the request before us to adopt the resolution, which is the attachment C or 3 in the packet here, which would approve the conditional use with the condition added regarding the pathway easement on the west side.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Bauer, to approve that resolution, approving the conditional use as outlined, with the condition as noted. Councilmember Schroeder is the maker of the motion, to the motion.
I also wanted to say that the Planning Commission looked at this, and I read the minutes, and they looked like they had a thorough conversation about a number of things, so, and that they voted on it, and so I feel comfortable supporting it.
All right, and as the seconder, Councilmember Bauer.
Yes, I did watch the video of the planning commission, and we'll support that as well. That they was a very good discussion and definitely impacted. It was good discussion, and definitely discussed many different areas and aspects that I thought were important.
All right, other discussion on the motion, Councilmember Groff.
I just think this will be an addition that is needed in our housing in Roseville. I mean, as she mentioned, the 2-bath, 2-bedroom layout is very popular and much in demand with rental. And I realize this is market rental, but we've been doing a variety of different types of affordability, so I think this fills another gap that we need.
All right, other discussion on the motion, Councilmember Strawn.
I think that as long as it looks like it's clearly outlined in what was passed by the planning commission, that the expectations on screening and landscaping to serve as buffers for the neighborhood are maintained and upheld, that I think that it will be less of an impact on those adjacent to the area, possibly providing more screening from Snelling Avenue now than they have now.
If there's no other discussion, I would just add that I agree with much of what has been said, and certainly with the support from the Planning Commission. I think we've got very robust standards as to screening and that sort of thing, and actually it will be an improvement on what's there now, so that'll be helpful. And I do want to recognize and note some of the comment from the testifiers at the Planning Commission in regards to certain maintenance issues, et cetera, with the existing properties that are not part of this consideration. Two things about that. One is that I think the council is probably rightly limited in how much, if at all, we can really take that into account as part of our consideration of an approval of an application with respect to this property. But at the same time, I think both at that hearing as well as, so we can repeat it now, we do encourage the owner to work with the city staff on any issues that have been identified and make sure that we do have those come into compliance, because that's important for the neighborhood, and I think it'll be of benefit to the property owner as well, certainly in the long run. And with that, I will be supportive as well of this resolution. With that, we've got the motion before us to approve the resolution approving this conditional use as outlined. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that approval is granted. Thank you again to the applicant, and wish you best of luck on the project, and low vacancy rates into the future. With that brings us to the end of our business items this evening. We don't have any council member initiated items or council minutes. The only thing remaining other than future agenda review is our brief consent agenda. I'll turn it over to City Manager Trudgeon to introduce our consent items this evening.
In the control room, could I have the computer screen, please? All right, as mentioned, Mr. Mayor, only 2 items, so this will be really quick. Item 10A approves payments in the amount of $750,240.62. And agenda item 10B approves the purchase of 2 dehumidification units, the skating center as planned for in the 2025 capital improvement budget, and the hiring of a contractor to do centerline painting as part of our annual contractual pavement painting. And that is the consent.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Discussion on the motion for the consent items? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those items are approved. And then, as mentioned before, the future agenda review, once again, back to Mr. Trudgeon.
Yes, we have a meeting next Monday, and we have a couple proclamations. We'll also have a public hearing for the certification of the unpaid utility bills, which we do on a pretty regular basis. We also will have consideration of a clear channel agreement regarding the use of digital displays as far as having city messages on there. We do have a number of alcohol and tobacco compliance failures, so that'll be the bulk of that evening. On June 2nd, we will have the consideration of the ethics complaint. I would mention that this coming Wednesday, the Ethics Commission will be meeting to consider that complaint. Also have the County Road B assessment hearing, and also receive a report from BKV regarding the Civic Campus Master Plan. Then on the 16th, I'll be bringing back the consideration of the Aldine right-of-way vacation. They have a joint meeting with the Finance Commission and kind of kick off some of very early budget conversations and really take a look at the property tax base. Any legislative changes, as you read in the paper today, they're scrambling again to meet the deadlines, and we'll see if they're in special session. So that might still be too early to really understand what landscape it looks like, but and also any budget goals in the July meeting. I would note in reading that article, I don't have any information beyond that, but it does seem some of that housing legislation is kind of dead on arrival that just can't come to any firm conclusions. So would not expect that to be passed at least this session, but I'm sure it's going to come back.
Right, and probably dead on arrival is not the right description for it, but dead as of this point.
As of this point,
It seemed like there was a pretty
True, yeah.
strong effort to try to get it passed, but it seemed like in committee that it sort of started to founder. So I did remember in that article they talked about that it would be most likely coming back in a future year, depending on what ends up in any omnibus bill that might happen. So stay tuned, but appreciate that update. Are there questions from council members on the future agenda? Councilmember Strawn.
Can we add Rosefest to the agenda for June, just so we all keep that in mind, because we are
To the list of meetings,
to the
essentially.
list of
Sure, yep,
meetings.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yes.
We do have that really, really complicated meeting at the end of June where we all sit in the back of a pickup truck.
Or we walk.
Which
Or
has
what?
to be noticed.
Yes,
Yes, I'll that next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the future agenda?
Wondering if sometime in the future we could add the street light policy, because I'm getting a lot of calls on that, and I would like the council to have a discussion on that.
Councilmember Graff, is there, I know we've talked about it a little bit offline, but is there a certain thing you want us to come back with? Because the council did adopt that policy. You just want to have a refresher and conversation.
Is there certain aspects that need to change?
Yeah,
or-
well, perhaps. I mean, the feedback I'm getting is that the people don't want them, and so I want to know whether we're going to require them where it's recommended or not, and whether there is any, I think the public wants to know what the policy is and how they can work with that. So that's what I mean.
Maybe informational update.
They're also
potential
thinking that
discussion.
with the finances the way they are, is our street lights really where we should be putting that amount of money at this time, since no one wants them on the blocks that I'm hearing from anyway.
All right. We'll note that. And that would be, so I believe, unless the council objects or suggests otherwise, that would be under our normal councilmember-initiated item, where
Correct.
that would be at the next meeting for consideration by the council as to whether it goes on a future agenda.
Yes.
Unless the council wants it to be just put on an agenda. That's an option the council has at this time. Bring it back under the normal policy?
Yeah.
Seems that way. All right. Very good. Other reports, announcements, questions on the future agenda or councilmember-initiated items for future meetings? Councilmember Strong?
I just had a question about, did we come to a final decision on the massage therapy? Or are we bringing that back at some point
Oh, yeah,
soon?
we'll be bringing that back, yeah.
Oh, it's just not on the docket yet?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Further out
Thank
into
you.
the future. All right. If there's nothing else, then I think the only other item on our agenda this evening is adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Bauer to adjourn. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously. We are adjourned at 7:11 PM. Thank you, everyone.